The plasma rounds scorched the air above Lieutenant Marcus Chen's head as he pressed himself flat against the crystalline rock formation. 3 days ago, his 6-man SEAL team had infiltrated the Krell mining colony on Epsilon Reticuli, V with what Command had called a standard reconnaissance mission. Standard had gone sideways the moment their dropship took fire during atmospheric entry. Now they were trapped in a box canyon with approximately 200 Krell soldiers closing in from 3 sides. The insectoid aliens clicked and chittered to each other in their harsh language, their forearms wielding weapons that could punch through standard body armor like tissue paper. Chen's team had maybe 20 minutes of ammunition left between them, and the 4th side of the canyon ended in a sheer cliff face that dropped 300 meters into a lava field. Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell crouched beside Chen, her face streaked with dirt and alien blood. She'd taken a grazing hit to her shoulder 2 hours ago, but she hadn't complained once. That was Mitchell, tough as recycled steel and twice as sharp. She caught his eye and tapped her wrist computer. The gesture said everything. No evac coming. No reinforcements. No miracle. 6 minutes until they flank our position, whispered Chief Tom Rodriguez from behind a boulder 10 meters to Chen's left. The chief had been counting Krell movements with the precision of a man who'd survived 15 years of the worst humanity's enemies could throw at him. They're smart, waiting for us to waste our ammo. Chen knew Rodriguez was right. The Krell weren't the mindless bugs that pre-war propaganda had painted them as. They were tactical, patient, and they understood human psychology well enough to know that trapped soldiers would panic. But SEALs didn't panic. They adapted. The problem was that Chen couldn't see any adaptation that didn't end with 6 dead Americans on an alien rock nobody back home had even heard of. The mission had been compromised from the start. Someone had sold them out. The Krell had known they were coming. The ambush at the landing zone had killed their pilot and destroyed their only way off this burning hellscape. Corpsman Jake Williams was doing what he could for Private Danny Okoye, who'd caught shrapnel in his leg during the running firefight that had driven them into this canyon. Okoye bit down on a piece of his own belt to keep from screaming as Williams dug out the metal fragments. The kid was 19, fresh out of training. This was his first real deployment. "Lieutenant," called out Sergeant Mike Hawkins from the right flank, motion sensors picking up movement on the ridge. "They're positioning heavy weapons up there." Chen closed his eyes for just a moment. Heavy weapons meant they were done playing games. The Krell were going to bombard this position until nothing remained but carbon scoring and broken equipment. There would be no prisoners. The Krell had made their policy clear after the Battle of Proxima Station. Humans who resisted were eliminated. Completely. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. Emma was 7 now, old enough to understand that Daddy went away sometimes to keep her safe. Not old enough to understand that Daddy might not come back. He'd promised her he'd be home for her birthday next month. He'd promised to take her to see the dolphins at the Pacific Reserve. "All positions," Chen said quietly into his comm, his voice steady despite everything. "Prepare for final stand protocols. Make every shot count. If we're going out, we take as many of these bugs with us as we can." "Hooah," came the quiet responses from his team. Not resignation in their voices, defiance. They were SEALs. They would fight until the last bullet, and then they would fight with knives and fists and teeth if they had to. Mitchell checked her rifle. 19 rounds, she reported. 1 grenade. Around the makeshift perimeter, the rest of the team called out their ammunition counts. Between all of them, they had maybe 300 rounds total, against 200 Krell soldiers. The math was brutal and simple. The clicking sounds of the Krell communication grew louder. They were coordinating their final assault. Chen could picture it in his mind, suppressing fire from the heavy weapons on the ridge. Infantry rush from 3 directions simultaneously. Overwhelming force applied to a fixed position. Textbook tactics. The kind that worked. "Movement," Rodriguez called out. "They're advancing." Chen brought his rifle up, sighting down the scope at the first wave of Krell soldiers that emerged from behind the rock formations. 6-legged bodies covered in chitinous armor that gleamed in the red light of the system's dying star. 4 arms, 2 gripping rifles, 2 holding close combat weapons. Mandibles that could crush human bone. Eyes like clusters of black pearls that never seemed to blink. "Hold fire," Chen ordered. "Let them get closer. Make the shots count." The Krell advanced in a skirmish line, their weapons ready but not firing. They knew the humans were cornered. Why waste ammunition when you could simply walk up and finish it with overwhelming numbers? 50 meters, 40, 30. Fire, Chen said. The canyon erupted with gunfire. SEALs were trained to make every bullet find its mark, and they didn't waste the training. Krell soldiers dropped, their armor cracking under the concentrated fire. But for every one that fell, 3 more advanced. The heavy weapons on the ridge opened up, sending superheated plasma bolts crashing into the rocks around the human position. Mitchell's grenade sailed through the air and detonated in the middle of a Krell squad, sending bodies flying. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Reloading, Hawkins shouted. Last magazine, Rodriguez called out. The Krell kept coming. Professional, relentless, inevitable. Chen fired his last rounds and dropped the empty magazine. He reached for his sidearm, knowing it was a symbolic gesture more than anything else. A pistol against armored aliens. But symbols mattered. They always had. That's when Mitchell grabbed his arm. "Sir," she said, her voice tight. "Listen." Chen strained his ears past the sounds of plasma fire and clicking mandibles and his own thundering heartbeat. At first he heard nothing. Then so faint he almost missed it, a sound like distant thunder, except there were no clouds in the ash-gray sky of Epsilon Reticuli 4. The sound grew louder, closer, a deep thrumming that seemed to make the very air vibrate, and the Krell stopped advancing. Their clicking communication became frantic, almost panicked. They were looking up at the sky, their weapons tracking something Chen couldn't see yet. Then he saw it. A dark shape dropping through the atmosphere, moving fast and low, trailing fire and fury behind it. The shape of an aircraft that shouldn't exist this far from Earth. The shape of something that had been retired from active service decades ago because newer, fancier ships had replaced it. The shape of an A-10 Thunderbolt II, and it was coming in hot. The A-10 came in barely 50 meters above the canyon floor, its twin turbofan engines screaming a war cry that echoed off the crystalline walls. Chen had seen aircraft before, plenty of them, but never anything like this. The thing looked like it had been welded together from spare parts and pure stubbornness. Scorch marks covered its titanium bathtub cockpit. Patches of mismatched armor plating spoke to field repairs done under fire. But those twin tail fins and that distinctive nose were unmistakable. Someone had brought a warthog to an alien planet, and whoever was flying it clearly didn't care about subtlety. The Krell heavy weapons on the ridge swiveled to track the aircraft. Plasma bolts lanced through the air, brilliant streams of superheated death that would have turned any modern fighter into vapor. The A-10 jinked hard right, then left, the pilot throwing the aircraft around like it was a fighter half its size instead of a flying tank designed to absorb punishment and keep flying. More plasma fire. A bolt clipped the A-10's left wing, tearing a chunk out of the armor plating. The aircraft shuddered but didn't break. Didn't even slow down. It just kept coming, lining up on the Krell positions like a predator that had spotted prey. Then it opened fire. The GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon was a weapon from an earlier age of warfare, back when humanity fought itself instead of aliens. 7 barrels, 30mm rounds, depleted uranium cores, 4,000 rounds per minute. The sound it made wasn't a sound at all. It was the voice of violence itself, a brrr-t that seemed to tear reality apart. The first burst caught the Krell heavy weapons position on the ridge. 30mm rounds designed to punch through tank armor, hit the alien soldiers like the hammer of an angry god. Krell bodies literally came apart. Weapons exploded. Rock shattered. In 2 seconds of sustained fire, the entire position simply ceased to exist. The A-10 pulled up, rolled, and came back around for another pass. The Krell soldiers in the canyon were scattering now, their tactical discipline breaking in the face of something they hadn't been trained to fight. Their weapons were designed for infantry combat and light armor. The A-10 was a dedicated ground attack aircraft that had survived every attempt to retire it precisely because it was too good at its one job: killing everything on the ground. Holy hell. Mitchell breathed beside Chen. Is that what I think it is? Impossible, Rodriguez said, but he was grinning like a maniac. Those things were mothballed 50 years ago. The Air Force said they were obsolete. The A-10 made its second pass, this time targeting the Krell soldiers who'd been advancing on the SEAL position. The cannon spoke again. Brrrt. The sound of liberation. Krell fell in waves, their armor no match for weapons designed to destroy armored vehicles. 30mm rounds didn't just kill, they erased. Chen watched in something close to religious awe as the aircraft worked the canyon like a surgeon with a very large, very angry scalpel. The pilot knew exactly what they were doing. Every burst was precise, every pass calculated. The A-10 never stayed in one place long enough for the remaining Krell to get a solid lock. It twisted and turned with an agility that shouldn't have been possible for an aircraft that size. A Krell shoulder-fired missile streaked toward the A-10. The pilot dumped flares and chaff, braking hard left. The missile detonated in the cloud of countermeasures, harmless. The A-10 circled back and deleted the soldier who'd fired it with a 1-second burst from the cannon. "We've got friendlies in the canyon," Chen said into his comm, broadcasting on all military frequencies. "Air support, identify yourself. Who's flying that beautiful machine?" No response. Just another pass, another brat. Another dozen Krell soldiers turned into paste. The remaining Krell were running now. The organized retreat of a professional military force, but retreat nonetheless. They'd come to kill 6 humans and instead found themselves being hunted by something out of their worst nightmares. The A-10 pursued them out of the canyon, the cannon falling silent as the aircraft disappeared over the ridge. For 30 seconds, the world was quiet except for the ringing in Chen's ears and the groans of the wounded. Then the A-10 came back. Slower this time, almost gentle. It circled the SEAL position once, twice, like a protective mother checking on her children. Chen could see the cockpit now, see the figure behind the armored glass. Too far to make out details, but close enough to see them rock their wings in salute. "Unknown pilot," Chen tried again. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Chen, SEAL Team 7. You just saved our lives. Please identify yourself so we can buy you every drink on Earth when we get home." Still no response. But the A-10 waggled its wings again as if to say message received. Then something dropped from the aircraft's belly. Not a bomb, a cargo pod. It hit the ground 20 meters from Chen's position with a thud that kicked up dust and small rocks. The pod split open automatically, revealing supplies, medical gear, ammunition, water, food, a communication beacon already transmitting an emergency signal that would bring evac ships running. The A-10 climbed, gaining altitude, and Chen finally saw what he'd been too focused to notice before. The aircraft was covered in kill markings, not the neat regulation marks that pilots were supposed to use. These were rough hand-painted tallies covering every available surface. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. This aircraft had been in combat. "A lot of combat, sir," Williams called out. "There's a note in the med supplies." Chen jogged over, his legs shaky from adrenaline crash. Williams handed him a piece of actual paper, folded once. Chen unfolded it and read the handwritten message. "Heard you boys needed a ride. Sorry I'm late. Had to stop for gas. Evac will be here in 20 minutes. Stay safe, stay quiet. They don't know I'm here yet, and I'd like to keep it that way. Fair winds and following seas seals." No signature, no name. Just a small doodle at the bottom of an A-10 with a smiling face drawn on the nose. "Who is this person?" Hawkins asked, staring at the distant speck of the aircraft as it disappeared over the horizon. "Guardian Angel," Mitchell said softly. "That's who." Rodriguez was already breaking into the supplies, distributing ammunition and medical gear. Okoye was getting proper treatment from Williams now that they had real medical supplies instead of improvised field dressings. The emergency beacon blinked its steady pulse, a promise of rescue. Chen looked up at the ash-gray sky where the A-10 had vanished. Somewhere up there was a pilot flying an ancient, obsolete aircraft that wasn't supposed to exist in this war. A pilot who had somehow heard about 6 stranded SEALs and decided to do something about it. A pilot who asked for no recognition, no thanks, no glory, just results. "Listen up," Chen said to his team. "When command asks what happened here, we stick to the facts. Unknown friendly provided air support and emergency supplies. We don't embellish. We don't speculate. And if anyone asks who saved us, we tell them the truth. We don't know." "Understood." "Why the secrecy, sir?" Hawkins asked. Chen looked at the note again. "Stay quiet. They don't know I'm here yet." "Because," he said slowly, "I think we just met someone who's fighting a different kind of war than the rest of us. And if they don't want to be noticed, the least we can do is respect that." Mitchell nodded. "The SEALs stayed mute." "The SEALs stayed mute," Chen agreed. It would become their private motto for this mission. The story of the day they were saved by a ghost in an impossible aircraft. A story they would tell each other but never put in an official report. The A-10 was gone now, just another mystery in a war full of them. But as Chen organized his team to prepare for evac, he couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out there in the black, someone was still fighting with humanity's old weapons, still proving that obsolete didn't mean ineffective, and judging by those kill markings, they were very, very good at their job. Captain Jessica Hawk Moreno killed the engines and let her A-10 drift on momentum as she crossed into the debris field that orbited Kepler Station. The ancient warthog moved silent as a ghost through the chunks of destroyed warships and forgotten satellites. This was her home now. The shadows. The places nobody looked. She'd been flying for 16 hours straight, and her body was reminding her of every one of them. Her lower back ached from the ejection seat. Her hands cramped from gripping the stick through combat maneuvers that would have made her old instructors scream. Her eyes burned from staring at threat displays and targeting computers that flickered more often than they worked. But the SEALs were safe. That's what mattered. Jessica brought up the tactical display, checking her 6 for any signs of pursuit. Nothing. The Krell had no idea what had hit them, and by the time they'd organized a response, she'd been long gone. That was the key to survival in this new reality. Hit hard, hit fast. Disappear before anyone could ask questions. Her A-10 was a relic, just like she was. The aircraft had been pulled from storage at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base 3 years ago, when she'd gone rogue. At the time, everyone had thought she was crazy. The military brass had called it desertion. Her family had called it a breakdown. Her former squadron had called it career suicide. They'd all been right, in a way. She had deserted. She had broken under the weight of watching humanity lose battle after battle, while politicians played games and generals worried about budgets. And her career was definitely dead, but suicide implied failure. And Jessica Moreno was very much alive, and so were a lot of people who wouldn't be if she'd followed orders and stayed grounded. The A-10 drifted deeper into the debris field. This particular cluster of wreckage had been here since the Second Battle of Kepler, 18 months ago. 3 human cruisers and a Krell battle group had destroyed each other in a fight that neither side could really claim to have won. The dead ships hung in space now, monuments to futility, but they also made perfect hiding spots for someone who didn't want to be found. Jessica guided her aircraft into the hollowed-out engineering section of what had once been the UNS Defiant. The cruiser's skeleton provided cover from sensors and a place to cache supplies. She'd set up a dozen such hiding spots across this sector of space. Never stay in one place too long. Never establish a pattern. Never give them a chance to corner you. The A-10 settled onto the makeshift landing pad she'd welded together from hull plates. Magnetic clamps engaged, holding the aircraft secure. Jessica went through the shutdown sequence, her hands moving through the familiar motions. Fuel check. Ammunition count. Systems diagnostic. Damage assessment. The port wing had taken that plasma hit during the SEAL rescue. The armor had held, but she'd need to patch it before the next mission. She was down to 1,200 rounds for the cannon. That was cutting it close. She'd have to risk a supply run soon. Jessica popped the canopy and climbed out, her legs nearly buckling as gravity reasserted itself. She was 34 years old, but she felt 60. 3 years of living in a cockpit, eating ration packs, sleeping in 4-hour shifts. 3 years of fighting a one-woman war that no one had asked her to fight. But someone had to do it, and everyone else was too busy following procedure. She walked through the dead corridors of the Defiant, her boots magnetized to keep her grounded in the zero-G environment. The ship still had power in some sections, emergency batteries that would last another few years before everything went dark. She'd claimed the captain's quarters as her own. It felt appropriate somehow. She was a captain now, even if she'd given herself the rank. Captain of an army of one. The quarters were sparse. A sleeping bag magnetized to the wall. A small heating unit for her meals. A tablet computer that she'd hacked to intercept military communications. A picture of her daughter, Emily, taped to the bulkhead. Emily was 9 now, living with Jessica's parents back on Earth. Safe. That's what mattered. Jessica heated a ration pack and forced herself to eat even though she wasn't hungry. Fuel for the body. Maintenance for the machine. She'd learned a long time ago that taking care of herself meant taking care of her aircraft, and taking care of her aircraft meant she could take care of others. The tablet beeped. New intercepts. She pulled up the data, scanning through encrypted military communications that her homemade decryption software had cracked. Most of it was routine. Supply convoys. Patrol schedules. Status reports from a dozen different units spread across 5-star systems. Then she saw it. A distress call from a mining outpost in the Sirius system. Krell Raiders. Civilian population requesting evacuation. Response time from nearest military asset. 6 hours. 6 hours. The civilians would be dead or captured in 2. Jessica looked at the fuel gauge on her tablet. 40%. Barely enough to make it to Sirius and back, and that was assuming everything went perfectly. Which it never did. She looked at the picture of Emily. Those brown eyes that were so much like her own. That smile that could light up a room. Emily, who would grow up without a mother because Jessica had chosen to do this. Emily, who might never understand why her mom had abandoned everything for a war that Command said was unwinnable. Jessica picked up the tablet and began plotting a course to Sirius. Because Emily deserved to grow up in a galaxy where people protected each other. Where someone stood up when civilians were in danger. Where obsolete didn't mean defeated. She finished her meal and began prepping the A-10 for another mission. The wing patch could wait. The ammunition situation would have to do. Sleep was a luxury she'd given up on achieving in meaningful quantities. 20 minutes later, she was strapped back into the cockpit, running through pre-flight checks. The engines spun up with their familiar whine. The heads-up display flickered to life, showing her the path to Sirius. 6 civilian settlements. Population 3,000. Inbound Krell force estimated at battalion strength. Terrible odds. Impossible mission. Just another Tuesday for Captain Jessica Moreno. She released the magnetic clamps and fired maneuvering thrusters, guiding the A-10 out of the Defiant's broken hull. The debris field fell away behind her as she increased thrust, accelerating toward the jump point that would take her to Sirius. The stars stretched and compressed as she transitioned to faster-than-light travel. Einstein would have been horrified by the physics, but the jump drives worked regardless of theoretical objections. Humanity had learned a lot in the 3 years since first contact with the Krell. Mostly, they'd learned how to run away faster, but some people learned how to fight smarter. The A-10 wasn't fast by modern standards. It wasn't stealthy. It didn't have shields or fancy point defense systems. It was just a titanium bathtub with wings and the biggest gun ever fitted to an aircraft. But that simplicity was its strength. No complex systems to break down. No AI that could be hacked. No reliance on supply chains that barely functioned during wartime. Just a pilot, an aircraft, and pure stubborn human determination. Jessica checked the mission clock. 4 hours to Sirius. Then 2 hours of combat operations if she was lucky. Then 4 hours back to her hiding spot, assuming she survived. She'd be flying on fumes by the end, but that was nothing new. She thought about the SEALs she'd saved. Wondered if they'd make it home. Wondered if they had families waiting for them. Wondered if they'd ever know that the woman who saved them was technically a deserter with a bounty on her head, from her own military. Probably better that they didn't know. The SEALs staying mute was the smartest thing they could do. For their protection as much as hers, because the brass would never understand what she was doing out here. They'd see a rogue pilot in a stolen aircraft. They'd see someone who'd broken the chain of command. They'd see a problem that needed to be solved. They wouldn't see what she saw. The map of human space on her displays marked with hundreds of pins, each pin a place she'd been, a battle she'd fought, a life she'd saved, a settlement protected, a convoy escorted, an enemy ambush disrupted, one pilot, one aircraft, making a difference where the official military couldn't or wouldn't. The A-10 flew on through the darkness between stars, carrying its lonely warrior toward the next fight. Jessica closed her eyes for just a moment, allowing herself a brief rest. When she opened them again, Sirius would be waiting. And so would 3,000 people who needed someone to believe that help was coming. She would be that help. Just like she'd been help for those SEALs. Just like she'd be help for the next group of people who found themselves abandoned by a system too broken to save them. This was her war now, and she was winning it one mission at a time. Admiral Rebecca Kincaid stood in the Strategic Operations Center aboard the UNS Constellation, staring at a holographic display that showed her everything she already knew was going wrong. Red markers indicated Krell positions. Blue markers showed human forces. There was a lot more red than blue, and the blue markers kept disappearing. The war was not going well. That was the polite way of putting it. The honest way was that humanity was losing, slowly but certainly, system by system, battle by battle. The Krell had better technology, better logistics, and most importantly, better unity of purpose. While human governments argued about jurisdiction and funding, the Krell simply conquered. "Admiral," Commander Park said, approaching with a data pad. "Intelligence has something you need to see." Kincaid took the pad, scanning the report quickly. Then she read it again, slower. Then a third time, because what she was reading didn't make sense. "A single aircraft," she said slowly, an A-10 Thunderbolt, appeared at Epsilon Reticuli, saved 6 trapped SEALs, killed an estimated 70 Krell soldiers, and vanished before anyone could identify the pilot. "Yes, ma'am. The SEAL's testimony is consistent. They're calling it an unknown friendly." Kincaid scrolled down. "This is the 6th report in 3 months. Different systems, different circumstances. Always the same aircraft type. Always appearing when human forces are in desperate situations. Always disappearing before identification." 7 reports, actually, Park corrected. "We just received confirmation from Sirius. A mining outpost was about to be overrun. Single A-10 engaged a Krell battalion, held them off long enough for evacuation shuttles to arrive, then withdrew." Kincaid set down the pad and rubbed her temples. She'd been in the military for 32 years. She'd seen combat in 4 different conflicts before the Krell arrived. She'd commanded carrier groups and led fleet actions. She'd thought she'd seen everything. She had not seen this. "We mothballed the entire A-10 fleet 50 years ago," she said. "Every single airframe was supposed to be in storage or scrapped. According to inventory records, they were," Park said. "We've been cross-referencing. Every A-10 that was supposed to be in storage is accounted for, except one." Kincaid looked up sharply. "Which one?" Park pulled up another file. Serial number 80-245, pulled from Davis Monthan storage facility 3 years ago, supposedly for a military museum. The paperwork was legitimate at the time. Nobody questioned it because A-10s were considered obsolete. Who would steal obsolete equipment? Someone who understood that obsolete and useless are not the same thing, Kincaid muttered. She studied the file. 3 years ago, that's when this started. The random appearances, the impossible rescues. Who signed the paperwork? Park hesitated. Captain Jessica Moreno, former combat pilot, 2 tours in the Middle East back when we were still fighting each other. Decorated combat veteran. She went AWOL 3 years ago, right after signing out that A-10. Kincaid pulled up Moreno's service record. The picture showed a woman with sharp features and determined eyes. Combat ribbons covered her chest. Commendations for valor, expert pilot ratings. Then 3 years ago, a gap in the record, and a warrant for her arrest on charges of desertion and theft of military property. Tell me about her AWOL, Kincaid said. Park pulled up another file. She'd been assigned to training duty, new pilots familiarizing them with ground attack procedures. According to her commander, she became increasingly frustrated with the pace of the war effort. Said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. Wanted to engage the Krell more aggressively. When her proposals were denied, she apparently took matters into her own hands. Kincaid read through Moreno's proposals. They were aggressive, certainly. Some would call them reckless, but they were also tactically sound. Small unit operations, hit-and-run tactics, asymmetric warfare designed to disrupt Krell logistics rather than meet them in pitched fleet battles humanity couldn't win. The proposals had been rejected as too risky, too radical, too far outside established military doctrine, so Moreno had stolen an A-10 and implemented them anyway. 7 confirmed appearances, Kincaid said. How many suspected appearances? Park pulled up another map. Red dots appeared across human space. 43 incidents that matched the pattern. Most in the past 18 months. Always the same scenario. Human forces in trouble. Sudden appearance of air support. Krell forces disrupted or destroyed. Support aircraft vanishes before proper identification. 43. 1 pilot. 1 aircraft. 43 times she'd appeared out of nowhere to save people who would have died without her. What's her success rate? Kincaid asked. Unknown, ma'am. These are just the incidents we know about. There are probably more we don't. But in every confirmed case, she achieved her objective. 0 friendly casualties on her watch. Kincaid looked at the map, at those red dots scattered across human space. Each one represented lives saved. Mission succeeded. A victory in a war that had precious few of them. And here was Kincaid, an admiral with a fleet under her command, looking at what one deserter in an obsolete aircraft had accomplished. She's been engaging Krell forces for 3 years, Kincaid said slowly. Where is she getting fuel? Ammunition, parts? You can't keep an aircraft running on wishes and determination. That's the thing, ma'am. We've been analyzing the pattern. She's hitting Krell supply depots, stealing their fuel, modifying it for her engines, scavenging parts from wreckage. There are 6 dead Krell freighters in the past year that were reported as destroyed by unknown forces. We think that was her stockpiling supplies. Kincaid almost laughed. Moreno wasn't just fighting the Krell. She was making them supply her own operations. That took audacity, and skill, and a level of tactical thinking that most admirals would kill to have in their command staff. Admiral, Park said quietly, we have a problem. The warrant for Moreno's arrest is still active. If we locate her, regulations require we apprehend her and bring her up on charges. Regulations, Kincaid repeated. She looked at the map again. Those 43 red dots. Those lives saved. Commander, what's the estimated Krell casualty count from Moreno's operations? Park consulted his data. Conservative estimate? 800 killed or wounded, plus significant equipment losses. If we include supply disruption and secondary effects, she's probably cost them the equivalent of a full regiment. 1 pilot, 1 aircraft, 1 regiment of enemy casualties. Meanwhile, Kincaid's fleet had lost 3 cruisers and 2 destroyers in the past month alone, with minimal enemy losses to show for it. Ma'am, Park said carefully, what do you want to do about this? Kincaid was quiet for a long moment, thinking about regulations and reality, about the war they were losing and the woman who was winning her own private piece of it, about the fact that following procedure had been getting people killed while breaking it had been keeping them alive. We don't do anything, she said finally. Park blinked. Ma'am? We don't do anything, Kincaid repeated firmly. Captain Moreno is effectively running independent operations against the Krell, operations that are succeeding. The moment we try to bring her in, those operations stop. The moment we acknowledge what she's doing officially, the Krell will start actively hunting her. Right now she's a ghost. Let's keep her that way. But the regulations can be flexible in wartime, Kincaid said. Commander, you will make a note in the operational log that we've investigated reports of unknown friendly activity. You will conclude that the reports are likely due to sensor glitches and combat stress. You will recommend no further action. You will then classify that report at the highest level. Park stared at her. You're covering for her. I'm protecting an asset, Kincaid corrected. An asset that's been more effective than half my fleet. If word gets out that we have a rogue pilot killing Krell, every admiral in the sector will want to claim credit or shut her down. Either way, it ends her effectiveness. So we don't talk about this. Not with command. Not with intelligence. Not with anyone. Park considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. What about the warrant? Leave it active. It's her cover. Anyone checking records will see a deserter, not a strategic asset. They'll assume she's hiding from us, not hunting the Krell. Kincaid pulled up Moreno's picture again. 3 years she's been doing this. Living in wreckage. Eating rations. Flying missions that would break most pilots. No backup, no support. No recognition. Just the mission. That's dedication, ma'am. That's insanity, Kincaid said quietly. The kind of insanity we need more of. She closed the file. There's one thing we can do for her, though, discreetly. Ma'am? Kincaid pulled up a logistics manifest. Those Krell supply depots she's been hitting. We know where several more are located from our intelligence gathering. Information we haven't acted on because we don't have the resources to hit them properly. But if that information happened to be transmitted on an open channel that someone monitoring military communications might intercept. Park smiled for the first time. Accidental intelligence leaks. How unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Also unfortunate would be if some of our supply convoys happened to leave ammunition and fuel caches in predictable locations. Standard procedure, of course. Can't be helped if someone stumbles across them. Of course not, ma'am. Kincaid looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Jessica pulled the A-10 out of its dive at the last possible second, her altimeter screaming warnings that she ignored. The Krell anti-aircraft battery exploded below her as her last missile found its mark. Shrapnel pinged off her titanium bathtub, but nothing penetrated. The old bird was living up to its reputation for taking punishment. She'd been hitting Krell positions in the Arcturus sector for 6 hours straight. Her body was beyond exhausted. running purely on adrenaline and military-grade stimulants that she tried not to think too hard about. The fuel gauge showed 12%, just enough to make it back to her current hiding spot if she didn't hit any more targets. But there was one more target. There was always one more target. Her intercepted communications had picked up Krell chatter about a prisoner transport. Humans captured from a failed colony defense. 47 civilians being moved to a detention facility for interrogation. The convoy was lightly guarded because the Krell thought this sector was secure. They thought wrong. Jessica brought up her tactical display. The convoy was 20 minutes away. 3 transport trucks, 2 escort vehicles. Standard Krell logistics pattern. The route passed through a narrow valley that would limit their maneuverability. Perfect killing ground. If she went after them, she wouldn't have enough fuel to make it back. She'd have to find a place to hide the A-10, cache it somewhere, and survive on foot until she could arrange recovery. Maybe days, maybe weeks. And every day on the ground was a day she wasn't flying. Wasn't saving people. Wasn't making a difference. 47 people. 47 lives that would end in Krell interrogation chambers if she didn't act. No choice at all, really. Jessica adjusted her course and pushed the throttles forward, coaxing every bit of speed from her engines. The A-10 wasn't built for speed, but it would have to be fast enough. She checked her ammunition. 400 rounds left for the cannon. No missiles. One emergency flare that she'd jury-rigged into something that might work as a distraction. 400 rounds against 5 vehicles. She'd worked with worse odds. The valley appeared on her sensors. Rocky walls, narrow passage, minimal cover. The Krell convoy was already in the throat of it, moving at cautious speed. Good. Cautious meant predictable. Predictable meant dead. She came in from the sun, using its glare to mask her approach. The old pilot's trick. Some things never changed, even in interstellar warfare. The Krell sensors didn't pick her up until she was already committed to her attack run. The GAU-8 spoke its familiar language. Brrrt. The lead escort vehicle came apart, blocking the convoy's path forward. Jessica pulled up, rolled, and came back for another pass. Brrrt. The rear escort exploded, trapping the convoy in the valley. Now the Krell were scrambling, trying to get their anti-aircraft weapons online. Jessica triggered her jury-rigged flare, and it tumbled through the air, sparking and smoking. The Krell tracking systems locked onto it instead of her, buying her precious seconds. She used those seconds well. Brrrt! A transport truck exploded. That was 15 civilians gone if they were in that one, but 22 better odds than 47 facing interrogation. No. Wait. Movement near the wreckage. Figures scrambling away. The prisoners had survived. The truck had been mostly empty, probably just cargo. All 3 transports were probably in the middle vehicle. Maximum protection. Standard prisoner transport doctrine. Jessica lined up on the remaining trucks, but the Krell had their act together now. Plasma fire lanced up from the ground. She jinked right, then left, but one bolt caught her right engine. Warning lights blazed across her console. Temperature spiking. Pressure dropping. The engine was dying, 200 rounds left. One shot at this. She pushed the dying engine as hard as it would go, ignoring the warnings telling her it was about to explode. The Krell soldiers on the ground were setting up heavy weapons, trying to create a proper defense. But they'd trained to fight modern aircraft, not something like the A-10 that could absorb damage and keep coming. Jessica aimed for the middle transport. Her targeting computer was flickering, so she used her eyes instead. The old way. The reliable way. She could see the Krell soldiers trying to move the prisoners. Could see the civilians in their dirty orange jumpsuits being herded at gunpoint. She pulled the trigger. The last 200 rounds of 30mm ammunition tore into the Krell soldiers guarding the transport. Bodies fell. The truck's armor held, but the guards were gone. The prisoners were running now, scattering into the rocks, smart enough to know that a chance was better than certain death. Jessica's right engine exploded. The blast rocked the aircraft, and suddenly she was flying with one engine and half a wing. The A-10 could fly on one engine. She'd proven that before, but not well. And not for long. The fuel gauge hit 5%. She was 60 kilometers from her hiding spot. She wasn't going to make it. Time for Plan B. Except she didn't have a Plan B. She had a plan maybe and a plan. Probably die trying. Jessica aimed the A-10 toward a flat stretch of desert 15 kilometers from the convoy. If she could set down there, maybe she could hide the aircraft. Radio for help. Figure something out. She'd survived worse. Probably. The working engine was screaming, pushed beyond its limits. The stick fought her, the damaged wing creating drag that wanted to spin the aircraft. Every second was a battle just to keep flying straight. 10 kilometers. 5. The desert was coming up fast. Too fast. She didn't have enough control left for a proper landing. This was going to be a controlled crash at best. Jessica ran through the emergency checklist. Strap in tight. Cut the fuel lines. Arm the ejection seat. Except her ejection seat had been damaged 6 missions ago, and she hadn't been able to fix it properly. If this went bad, she was riding it all the way down. 2 kilometers. She could see details now. Rocks, sand, a slightly flat area that would have to do. 1 kilometer. The engine quit entirely. The A-10 became a glider, trading altitude for distance. She'd done practice landings with dead engines in training, but that was on proper runways, not alien deserts. She pulled back on the stick, bleeding off speed, trying to set down as gently as possible. The landing gear deployed minus the damaged right side. She'd be landing on 2 wheels and a wing. This was going to hurt. The A-10 hit the ground at 140 kilometers per hour. The left gear held for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing. The aircraft skidded sideways, throwing up a spray of sand and rock. The wing dug in. Metal screamed. Something in the cockpit hit Jessica hard enough to make her vision blur. Then everything stopped. Jessica sat in the tilted cockpit, breathing hard, checking her body for damage. Left arm hurt, probably cracked ribs. Blood running down her face from somewhere. But alive. Still alive. She popped the canopy, which opened with a grinding protest. Climbed out, fell the last meter to the ground because her legs weren't working right. Forced herself to her feet because staying down meant dying. The A-10 was finished. The left wing was crumpled. The right engine was gone. The fuselage was cracked in 3 places. Even if she had the parts and tools, she couldn't fix this. Her partner for 3 years, her weapon, her home, dead in the desert on an alien planet whose name she couldn't remember. Jessica pulled her emergency pack from the cockpit. Survival gear, rations, water, a sidearm with 2 magazines. Not much, but it would have to do. She activated the aircraft's self-destruct beacon. 8 hours until it would detonate, destroying anything useful. No way was she leaving this tech for the Krell to study. She looked back toward the valley where the convoy had been. 47 civilians were out there somewhere, running through the rocks trying to survive. If they could link up with resistance forces or find a way to signal for evac, they had a chance. Because of her. Because she'd crashed an irreplaceable aircraft to save people she'd never meet. People who would never know her name worth it. Jessica started walking. She had 8 hours to put distance between herself and the A-10 before it exploded. 8 hours to find shelter. To figure out her next move. To survive one more day in a war that was trying very hard to kill her. Her right leg wasn't working properly. Probably damaged in the crash. She fashioned a walking stick from debris and kept moving. One step, then another. The basics. The fundamentals. Keep moving or die. The sun was setting, painting the alien sky in shades of purple and orange. Beautiful in a way. She'd seen a dozen alien sunsets in the past 3 years. Never had time to appreciate them. Always too busy flying, fighting, surviving. Now she had time. All the time in the world. No aircraft meant no missions. No missions meant no purpose. What was Captain Jessica Moreno without her A-10? She'd find out. Jessica walked into the desert, leaving her aircraft behind. The beacon in her pack was broadcasting on encrypted human frequencies. Someone might hear it. Someone might come, or they might not. Either way, she'd keep walking. Keep surviving. Keep fighting. Because 47 people were free who weren't before. Because the Krell had learned that nowhere was safe. Because one pilot and one obsolete aircraft had proven that humans didn't quit. Humans adapted. Humans endured. The A-10 exploded behind her exactly 8 hours later. A bright flash in the darkness. Jessica didn't look back. She just kept walking. One painful step at a time into whatever came next. Lieutenant Marcus Chen stood in the hangar bay of Forward Operating Base Sentinel, staring at something that shouldn't exist. The maintenance crews had finished their work 3 hours ago, and now the aircraft sat gleaming under the harsh lights, fresh paint covering old scars. An A-10 Thunderbolt II, Hull number 80-0245, the same serial number from the supply crate that had saved his team 6 months ago. Sir? Petty Officer Mitchell approached, her arm fully healed from the wound she'd taken on Epsilon Reticuli. Is that what I think it is? If you're thinking it's impossible, then yes, Chen said quietly. The aircraft looked different from when they'd seen it screaming through the canyon. Cleaner, newer, but the kill markings were still there. Hundreds of them painted on every available surface. The nose had a new addition, a small painted figure of a warthog with wings grinning fiercely. Chief Rodriguez joined them, looking equally confused. I heard Command found a crashed A-10 in the Arcturus sector. Thought it was scrap, but this thing looks combat ready. It is combat ready, said a voice behind them. Admiral Kincaid walked up, hands clasped behind her back. And it's going back into service. With a new pilot, Chen turned to face her. Ma'am, with respect, we mothballed these aircraft decades ago. How did one end up in the Arcturus sector? Kincaid's expression didn't change. That's classified, Lieutenant. What's not classified is that this aircraft has a combat record any pilot would envy. Someone flew it for 3 years, engaging enemy forces across a dozen systems, and achieved a success rate we can't match with our modern fleet. Someone, Mitchell repeated. Not a name, someone. The pilot of this aircraft is not part of this conversation, Kincaid said firmly. What is part of this conversation is that we've recovered a functional weapons system with proven effectiveness. We'd be fools not to use it. Chen looked at the A-10 again, thinking about that day in the canyon. The sound of the GAU-8. The way the pilot had known exactly where to hit, exactly how to help. The unsigned note in the supply crate. Who's flying it now? He asked. That's why I'm here. Kincaid pulled out a data pad. I need volunteers. Pilots who understand ground attack, who can think independently, who won't question orders that seem unconventional. This aircraft requires a different approach than modern fighters. It's slower, older, less sophisticated, but in the right hands it's deadly. One aircraft, Rodriguez said, against the entire Krell military. What's the point? The point, Chief, is that one aircraft in the right place at the right time has saved more lives in the past 3 years than some entire battle groups. The point is that we've been so focused on fighting the war we think we should be fighting that we forgot how to fight the war we actually have. Kincaid looked at each of them. Small unit operations. Rapid response. Supporting ground forces when they need it most. That's what this aircraft does. That's what its previous pilot proved could work. Chen understood then. This wasn't about the aircraft. It was about the strategy. About learning from someone who'd been winning while everyone else was losing. The pilot, he said slowly. The one who saved us. Are they? Not part of this conversation, Kincaid repeated, but something in her eyes told Chen everything he needed to know. The pilot was alive. Somewhere. And probably not in a position to fly anymore. Mitchell stepped forward. I volunteer, ma'am. I've got ground attack experience. And I owe that pilot my life. If flying their aircraft means continuing their work, I'm in. Rodriguez nodded. Same here, Admiral. That pilot bought us time to complete our mission. I'd like to return the favor to someone else. Chen looked at his team, then at the aircraft. The A-10 that had become a legend in 6 months. The ghost ship that appeared when hope was gone and disappeared before thanks could be offered. Count me in too, he said. The SEALs stayed mute about what happened to us. But we never forgot. If we can help other people the way we were helped, that's a debt worth paying. Over the next 6 weeks, more volunteers came forward. Pilots who'd heard the stories. Ground troops who'd been saved by an aircraft they never saw clearly. Marines who'd found supply caches exactly where they needed them, marked with a simple painted warthog symbol. Admiral Kincaid selected 12 pilots. They trained on restored A-10s pulled from storage, learning to fly the old birds the way the ghost pilot had. Low and slow, hard-hitting, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before the enemy could respond. They called themselves the Warthog Squadron, though officially they didn't exist. Black operations. Deniable assets. Just like their inspiration had been. Chen flew his first mission 3 months after that meeting in the hangar. A Marine platoon was pinned down on Kepler 442b. Krell forces had them surrounded. Evac was 20 minutes out. The Marines had 5 minutes of ammunition left. He brought the A-10 in at 50 meters, just like he'd seen done in that canyon. The GAU-8 sang its song of liberation. The Marines broke free. Evac arrived. Everyone went home. Chen never got a proper thank you. He disappeared over the ridge before anyone could identify his aircraft, just the way it was supposed to be. That's what they did now. 12 pilots flying 12 impossible aircraft, appearing in desperate situations, saving people who needed saving, and vanishing before recognition could come. The tactics that one rogue pilot had pioneered became doctrine for the squadron. Unconventional, effective, human. The war began to turn, not dramatically, not all at once, but in small ways. Convoys that made it through when they shouldn't have, outposts that held when they should have fallen, soldiers who came home when they were supposed to die, one battle at a time, one mission at a time, the way the ghost pilot had done it. Jessica Moreno sat in a hospital bed on Earth, her daughter Emily asleep in the chair beside her. The doctors had said she'd walk again eventually, but flying was done. The crash had seen to that. 3 years of combat had taken its toll. Her body was finished, but her tablet still worked. She could still monitor military communications, still intercept traffic from the combat zones, and what she heard made her smile despite the pain. Reports of unknown friendlies. A-10 sightings. Warthog Squadron, they were calling it. Though officially no such unit existed, 12 pilots flying 12 aircraft using the tactics she'd developed, saving lives the way she'd tried to save them. The SEALs had stayed mute just like she'd asked, but someone had been paying attention. Someone had understood what she'd been trying to prove. That obsolete didn't mean useless. That one person with determination could make a difference. That sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Emily stirred, opened her eyes. "Mom, you're smiling. Does that mean you're feeling better?" Jessica reached out and took her daughter's hand. "Yeah, baby. I'm feeling much better." She was home. Her aircraft was gone. Her flying career was over. But her war continued, flown by pilots who understood what she'd been fighting for. The mission went on. That's what mattered. On the tablet, another report came in. Warthog 3 had engaged Krell forces at the Sirius mining colony. 20 civilians evacuated safely. Pilot vanished before identification. Unknown friendly confirmed. Jessica closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest. Really rest, for the first time in 3 years. Because the weight she'd been carrying wasn't hers alone anymore. Other people had picked it up. Other pilots were making the same impossible choice she'd made. To help, regardless of cost. Admiral Kincaid sent her a message 3 months later. Encrypted, deniable. It simply read, "Your tactics are now doctrine. Your aircraft flies again in better hands. Your service, while never official, will never be forgotten." The SEALs stayed mute, so will we. "Thank you, Captain." Jessica deleted the message but kept the sentiment. She'd given up everything to fight her war. Her career. Her freedom. Nearly her life. But in return, she'd proven something that needed proving. That humans didn't quit. That obsolete just meant proven. That sometimes one person, one aircraft, one mission at a time was exactly what the galaxy needed. Emily was home from school now, telling her about her day, about her friends, about everything Jessica had missed during 3 years of flying. And Jessica listened, really listened, because this was what she'd been fighting for. This moment, this peace, this chance for her daughter to grow up in a galaxy where help came when you needed it. Even if that help came from the shadows, flown by pilots whose names you'd never know, in aircraft that weren't supposed to exist. The Warthog Squadron flew on, 12 ghosts carrying on the mission of the pilot who'd shown them the way. They saved lives. They disrupted enemies. They turned battles. And they never asked for recognition, never sought glory, never broke silence about who they were or what they did. The SEALs had stayed mute about their rescue. The Warthog Squadron stayed mute about their operations. Admiral Kincaid stayed mute about how it all began. And Jessica Moreno, the woman who'd started it all, stayed mute about everything. She was just a mother now, raising her daughter, healing slowly, living quietly. The war went on without her, but it went on better because of her. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones nobody talks about. The missions that stay classified. The heroes who remain unnamed. The impossible things that happen in the darkness while the official war marches on. Jessica looked at her tablet one last time before putting it away for the night. Another report. Another successful mission.